Welcome to Glass in Session. I'm your host, Val, and I'm so glad you're here. I hope you enjoyed the last booze disaster-themed episode, because this week we're going to continue our Potable Pop podcast potpourri. I know it's different than my usual format. I needed to shake things up a bit. So let's escape reality and slip into a fairy tale that's actually drunk history, shall we? Now, some of you, and I can almost hear you yelling at your phones, are reminding me that, hey, Val, this whole podcast, this is just Val doing some version of drunk history, right? Well, you have a point. My show, my rules. Thus, we are moving on to Little Red Riding Hood and how it started a culture war, since culture wars are all the rage right now. We're going to examine this story your parents read to you at bedtime and ask, what were they leaving out? I mean, why is Little Red Riding Hood supposedly so controversial? Not because it has a wolf in it, not because Grandma gets eaten alive, not because a woodman literally guts a wolf with an axe and stuffs the corpse with rocks. Nope. A couple of California school districts lost their minds over a bottle of wine. That's right. But before we get back to the 1990s school board wine panic, we have to go way, way back because this story is ancient and it is weird, and the wine is actually the least alarming thing in it. Yes, let's go back in time as we normally do, as this tale is older than you think and far more disturbing. While many of us know Little Red Riding Hood is a Grimm Brothers story, the Grimm Brothers did not write it. They basically heard it from some Huguenot sisters, Jeanette and Marie Hossenflug, who were actually of French descent, even though they were living in Germany. Either way, the Hossenflug stories, according to 20th century literary scholars, most likely came from French oral tradition, as many tales were passed down over generations. And this would have been in the early 19th century, as the Grimm brothers kind of started collecting their tales around the early 1800s, publishing their first stories actually in 1812. Yet the first version ever written down goes all the way back to 1697 by one each Charles Perrault. He, too, purportedly lifted it from French peasant oral folklore that had been circulating for centuries. It turns out we're dealing with a tale that is, at minimum, 1,000 years old. Could be older. And there are at least 58 versions, according to an article in the Smithsonian Magazine, which I linked, and oh, there's that offending bottle of wine in the illustration. You can see it poking out of the basket. Yes, many versions and even more plot variables around the world in so many different languages. In some versions, the big bad wolf wasn't even a wolf. He was a bisou, which I guess is Old French for werewolf. I've never heard the word. That's right, the story grew up alongside actual legal trials where men were accused of transforming into wolves and eating children. So when you hear Little Red Riding Hood and think, oh, cute little story about not talking to strangers, you are missing approximately 900 years of deeply traumatized European peasants screaming into the dark. Which brings us back to the big bad bottle of wine. In the original Grimm Brothers version, published in 1812, Little Redcap, as she was called by the Grimm brothers, or Rotkäppchen, she is sent into the woods by her mother with two things: a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. And you can read this in the University of Pittsburgh Folklore Archives, which I linked. The actual citation in the text is, "Come, Little Redcap, here is a piece of cake and a bottle of wine." This is not subtle. This is not metaphorical. The child is a minor courier for booze. Now, over in Perrault's French version from 1697, Little Red gets cake and a little pot of butter. And I think the Italian version, Mama sends soup. And if you had an Italian grandmother, that checks out. But the French version is a little bit more elegant in its danger. The wolf eats everyone, and the story just ends. No rescue. Moral: don't talk to wolves. Have a nice day. The end. Peace out. But the Grimm version, the one that became the global template, keeps the wine in, and it makes wine the thing that heals grandmother at the end. Here is the actual text from the 1857 final edition. The grandmother drank some wine, and after a while the grandmother felt quite strong and healthy and began to clean up the mess that the wolf had left in the cottage. That sounds like a regular Tuesday to me. However, we see how in the original story, wine is medicine. Wine is recovery. Wine is what a loving granddaughter brings to her ailing elder. A health tonic, if you will. This was historically accurate, by the way. For most of European history, wine or some kind of spirit was medicine. Water was frequently unsafe to drink. Weak wine was what you gave sick people, children, and the elderly, including a bedridden grandmother in 19th century rural Germany. And since this is a wine podcast, and you're thinking like I am, hey, what kind of wine do you think Little Redcap, the wine mule, hustled over to Grandma? Well, let's take a look at that. Considering the Grimm brothers are from Hanau, Germany, about 15 miles or so west of Frankfurt, and seem to have spent most of their lives in the Hessen region of Germany, with some later appointments at the University of Berlin, again according to the detailed chronology on the Grimm brothers homepage on the University of Pittsburgh's Trove of Folklore, which is delicious. This lands us close to the Franken region, which makes me so freaking Franken happy, because the only thing I remember from my wine studies about the Franken region is the iconic Boxbeutel, or flat, round-looking flask wine bottles. Boxbeutel, the reason I remember it, is because it translates roughly to book bag or goat scrotum, depending on what version of Old German you're using, and who wouldn't remember that little detail. Now, what's in most of the illustrations I found of the Little Red Riding Hood offending basket with the offending bottle, including the one that got the book banned, does not appear to be a Boxbeutel, but I'm still going to go with the region's traditional Silvaner or a Riesling here, so it appears to be a white wine, although Wines of Germany does tell us that early ripener grapes like Rivaner or Bacchus, which is a Silvaner crossed with Riesling that is then crossed with Müller-Thurgau, can do okay here too. So I'm going to go with their traditional Silvaner, but what is the big hairy deal about Little Redcap's big green bottle? Fast forward to 1989. A children's book illustrator named Trina Schart-Hyman, very talented, very award-winning, she illustrated a version of Little Red Riding Hood that stayed faithful to the German text. The book actually won a Caldecott Honor Award, one of the most apparently prestigious prizes in children's literature. Houghton Mifflin published it. California placed it on the, and I'm going to quote, state's recommended supplemental reading list for 5- and 6-year-olds. But then, in May 1990, the Culver City Unified School District pulled it. Why? The wine. And you can read this in the Seattle Times archive that I've attached from May 19, 1990, the original AP reporting on the ban. The assistant superintendent for instruction at the time said, and I'm quoting directly, "It gives younger ones the wrong impression about alcohol. If they should refrain, why give them a story saying it's okay?" And school board member, you can tell I don't have kids, right? And that's probably a really good thing. And a school board member, Robert Knopf, added that he would rather have seen a nice thing like cookies and cakes or a picnic basket with food in it. He wanted cookies instead of the wine that was literally in the source material from 1812. So diabetes it is. The Empire Union School District banned it too. And complaints also came in from other California school districts as well. But now here's where it truly gets unhinged. Houghton Mifflin's spokesperson at the time, a Sandy Coswell, said the ban was, and I quote, incomprehensible. The book had won a Caldecott honor. It was selected by California education authorities themselves. It was on a state reading list, but yet it got yanked because Grandma drank wine to recover from being, I don't know, half-eaten by a wolf? The logic being applied here is extraordinary. This is a story in which a wolf murders and eats an elderly woman. A child wanders alone through a forest of predators. A man shows up with an axe and performs emergency abdominal surgery on a wild animal. And the wolf's carcass is then stuffed with rocks until it drowns. But wine is the problem. The wine that heals Grandma. This is where we're going to draw the line. A 1,000-year-old bottle of wine corrupting the youth. Now here's the thing about Little Red Riding Hood. Every version of the story reflects the anxieties of the people telling it. In medieval France, the villain was a werewolf because people were genuinely terrified of werewolf trials and wolf attacks on children. In Perrault's 1697 version for the court of Louis XIV, the story had no rescue because it was a warning to aristocratic young women about predatory men. Very dark, but pointed. In the Grimm version, a huntsman saves the day, which feminist scholars have noted is very convenient for the men writing the story. Each generation rewrites the monster. The original monster was a werewolf cannibal. Perrault's monster was a smooth-talking seducer. And the Grimm monster is a clever predator who can talk. In 1990 Culver City, the monster was, apparently, wine. Maybe the wine had some terrifying acidity. Either way, Grandma enjoyed the hooch and just wanted to feel better. She'd just been assaulted by a wolf. She deserves a drink. And maybe Little Red Cap, maybe next time, if you really love your Oma, maybe you should take her some schnapps. So there we have it. The fairy tale turned drunk history turned headline-making drama over a silly bottle of wine. There's even more irony here as another set of brothers were discovering that sparkling wine was all the rage in mid-19th century Germany, about the time the Grimm brothers were kind of wrapping up their life's works and reaching those golden years. It was the brothers Kloss that founded what would become an iconic brand of sparkling wine. This is not an ad. I don't even believe I've ever had this brand. But it was in the Saale Unstrut wine region, about 2 to 3 hours south of Berlin. And you know what the brand name is? Rotkäppchen. Red Cap. That's right. Little Red Riding Hood. One of the northernmost regions of Germany, Saale Unstrut, focuses on white grapes, but red does grow here now, especially Spätburgunder or Pinot Noir. The company's history is interesting, and I linked up a couple of pieces on how they almost disappeared after the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, the same year California school districts started buzzing about Little Red Cap's bottle problem. Coincidence? I think not. No, that sounds like a conspiracy theory, and we're not going there. But now they have production centers in Eltville in Hesse and Hochheim am Rhein, as well as Breisach near the French border and Alsace in the Baden wine region. It now goes by the name Rotkäppchen Mom Set Kellerein, as it was acquired by Seagram's in 2005, and at the time of this Forbes article that I found, Red Riding Hood's share of the German sparkling wine market, or Red Cap's, I should say, share of the German sparkling wine market was over 50%. Now, I did an entire episode on Sekt, which I will link up for you. Sekt is just sparkling wine, Austrian and German. So you can drink some Little Red Riding Bubbly, if you will, and perhaps pair it with some fairy tale horror stories and escape to a time and a place where the wolf is the least of your problems. On that silly but yet another bubbly end note to an even sillier theme, I hope you found today's journey through the wilds of folklore and wine entertaining and maybe even a little educational. If you're into the geeky way we can pull wine out of literature, check out the episode I did on the Three Musketeers and the wines of Anjou back in season 7. In between episodes, you can also reach out to me via email. Email me at val@glassinsession.com or glassinsession@proton.me. On the socials, pick your poison. Blue Sky at Glass in Session. Vino with Val on Threads and Instagram. You'll see Glass in Session, trademarked, in my bio. On Spoutable, I'm Glass in Session sometimes. I'm Vino with Val on Pinterest. And on Facebook, you can find me at Facebook/Glass in Session. On Substack, I'm also Glass in Session. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Valerie Caruso. There's a bunch of letters after my name, wine stuff, and audiobook narrator. Yes, audiobook narrator. I just finished a book and I've got one in progress right now. You can find the latest audiobooks I've narrated on Audible along with this podcast. There is Glass in Session swag in my TeePublic store linked way at the bottom of the show notes and on my website. Thank you to those of you who are supporting the show. Glass in Session is a production and registered trademark of Vino With Val, LLC. Music is Write Your Story by Joystock. Website is glassinsession.com/podcast.